Welcome. I'm Chris Battistel. With me, as always, is Mike Haase. This is the One Foot Down podcast, a college fantasy football show on the Fantasy in Frames Network. Today, we're talking 6 programs that we are going to attack heading into the college football 2024 season. Mike, are you ready?
As always, ready.
Then let's get it, baby.
Welcome, football fanatics, to the One Foot Down podcast on the Fantasy in Frames Network. Your gridiron guides, Chris and Mike, are geared up to lead you through the thrilling world of college fantasy football. Whether we're diving into Power 5 giants or uncovering hidden gems, brace yourselves for expert insights, analysis, and daring predictions. Stay in the game. Subscribe, rate, and review. This is your 2024 source for college fantasy football dominance. Let the fantasy frenzy begin.
Mike, as the great poets once said, tag team back again. It's been a while, and we are back. Episode 2 of the One Foot Down podcast. If you missed episode 1, head back over to that episode. We delivered our favorite transfer portal targets. This time, we are talking some of our favorite programs in the college fantasy football landscape. But before we get into that, Mike, a couple of things happened across the football atmosphere since the last time we were able to talk. But the Super Bowl, what do you think? What was your biggest takeaway on it, man?
Yeah, seems like a long time ago now, eh? Oh my gosh.
Only a couple weeks.
We've been on winter vacation over here in Canada.
Actually, it's been spring, man. I don't know about you, but it's been spring for me.
Beautiful
brother.
Out there. Throw the football around.
That's it. The little road puck.
Yeah. The game, the first half, I think everybody would agree it was like, wow, is this going to pick up, right?
Yeah.
A little bit slow, and then second half got much better. In the game, highly entertaining second half, back and forth. And one takeaway, just thinking of it right now, the overtime rule and the coaches not knowing whether Shanahan knew, and the twists and turns with that going on, it led to pretty interesting to go into overtime. I think second overtime game in years. Like, it might only be the second Super Bowl overtime game. But decent overall. Had some fun that day, as you know, got into it a little bit, placed a few wagers here and there. Missed out on a few close ones, but all in all, good. How about you?
Yep. No, it was a good game, fun game altogether. I enjoy Dynasty, so seeing the Kansas City Chiefs win it and solidify themselves as a dynasty, I don't hate it. I'm a fan of sports greatness, and the Kansas City Chiefs are going down as one of those teams that are considered sports greatness. But we are not here to talk about NFL. No, we are here to talk about NCAA, college football, college fantasy football, and right now, Mike, I think it's fair to say we are in the thick of it. Currently going through a few drafts, couple best ball drafts. I've been a part of a couple mocks, but we've gone through a couple best ball drafts. If you want in one of these $5 best ball drafts hosted on Fantrax, hosted by Carp G926 on Twitter. If you head over to Twitter and follow Carp G926, he hosts a ton of these up until the start of the college football season, as well as CFF_Jared Palmgren from Chasing the Natty, and CFF guys. Those three guys, I believe, are the three that run a lot of these best ball college fantasy formats on Fantrax. $5 a pop, winner takes all. Just before we hop into these teams, Mike, what is one of the biggest takeaways? I guess you could say it's very early in these early best ball drafts.
Yeah, lots of fun. They've been really good. And to get experience here in the off season when we got a number of months before things kick into gear. But the one thing I noticed in the drafts, different than the NFL when we're drafting, is running back heavy. I'm going, you see the little red running back heavy. So I'm stuck in this one right now where I'm picking in the 12 slot and seeing those running backs go down. I'm like, oh my gosh. But that would be the one takeaway, because sometimes in the NFL, we go the zero running back method. People have their preferences as to what they want to do. Your wide receiver, Chris Battistel, going wide receiver heavy. So I'm trying to copy you a little bit with this one here.
Yeah.
Having some fun.
Yeah,
but that's
this
what
one
I know.
this one I've gone wide receiver heavy. I've slowed down and went wide receiver early in the beginning with Concepcion and Evan Stewart. I think I got Evan Stewart as a gift there at the 112, so I couldn't pass that up. Tie that to Kevin Concepcion of NC State. You can't go wrong with that combo. I mean, one of the trends that I've been able to see early on is the value you can get at tight end. You don't have to reach up early to grab a tight end. Maybe within the first 8 rounds, you don't really have to touch the position. And quarterback, you're going to be able to find some solid quarterbacks in the mid to late rounds of your drafts. So those are some early trends that we've been seeing in the college fantasy football landscape. It is only February. We got a long way to go. Spring training camps coming up. We got another transfer portal window opening. That secondary transfer portal window could absolutely ruin the stock of any of these draft picks that we make right now. So it's gutsy picking. It's just picking at a whim at this point. But Mike, before we get into these teams, let's hop into the chat and see who is with us today. We got Drew 3MR. What's up, Drew? How's it going? He said, what's up, fellas? Jorge Edwards, the boss man. What up? You always got to put your left hand up when Jorge is on the screen. All right, Mike? Because that's
hold up. Well,
make sure you got the right left, right? You just throw both up. He's excited for the draft. Washington Commanders, man. Top pick there, man. I mean, they're looking to secure future quarterback, and they're gonna have a choice at a good one there, whichever one falls to them in the draft. But Mike, let's get to our favorite programs to attack for college fantasy football for the college football 2024 season. We're each going to give you 3 teams here, and we're going to give you players on each of these 3 teams that we are going to be attacking in every draft, and why you should be drafting these guys in your college fantasy drafts. So first, Mike, we got to give you the, biased favorite here. Every episode, I think you're going to squeeze a topic of this team in here just so you can talk about the Notre Dame.
Oh, look at that. Look at that icon right there. That, I got to tell you, that gives you chills. Okay, we got to put. No,
yeah, let us know why players from the Fighting Irish should be attacked this season, man.
So in all honesty, Chris, you have to tell the truth. I tried to get out of taking Notre Dame to do this, and you said, oh, no. You put in Notre Dame. You can talk about them again. So
we do have a quota, right?
Right. So for tonight, especially, I got 2 or 3 themes of what you'll see through our 3 teams. And one of the themes that I thought about when I picked Notre Dame, Ole Miss, and Ohio State, to give a precursor, were my 3 teams with solid records: 10-3, 11-2, 11-2. It's some of the bigger programs in college, good offensive minds, coaches, Lane Kiffin, Marcus Freeman, Ryan Day. So I just thought we'd talk a little bit about that and the opportunities and fresh starts from the portal, people coming in, new players coming in, just to give a bit of background. So how I like to pick my fantasy teams, as Chris can attest to, and how he knows how I like to do that, is any of the leagues in the past that I've won or have success, as we all were trying to predict the next players that will step up and get the statistics. You need to have some solid players, obviously, to compete, and then trying to find those next in line, which is critical in the college game. So starting off with Notre Dame, I talked a lot about Riley Leonard in the first episode, so I won't talk as much about Riley, as he was injured last year, and he threw for about 1,000 yards and 3 touchdowns and ran for 4 touchdowns at Duke. But he's excited to be at Notre Dame. I think he'll be a good leader, a seamless transition from Sam Hartman. But the few players that I thought I'd talk about is the next guys up. So Jeremiah Love will be interesting. He just got picked in a draft a few moments ago. And I think they are in committee. So what I'm hoping with Jeremiah is that he would win, maybe win outright with Price and Payne, but they're all very good. And last year, Audric Estime, they first, I remember sitting down and watching the first 2 games. It was like, who's going to carry the ball? Who's going to take the load? And Audric did eventually. And watching Jeremiah Love, you can see the talent and the pedigree there for him to carry the torch, hopefully next. Last year, he ran for 385 yards, 5.4 average. So pretty, not bad. And he was in that secondary role. So we want him to step up. Chris Mitchell, who they brought in from the portal, 1,100 yards receiving and 7 TDs. And the interesting stat is 17.5 average. So why I picked this is last year, it didn't seem they were stretching the field enough, Notre Dame. So they were doing a lot of underneath, and it seemed like Sam was scrambling around. I know Riley can do that, but I think they need a couple down the boundaries, guys that can lengthen and stretch the defense. So that 17.5% average could be valuable. And one player that stepped up last year, that's a sleeper. So I'll name a sleeper on their team, is Jordan Faison. The end of the year, he was amazing. Amazing. So there's these players that may not be great early on, but they can help you later on at the end and win a championship in college fantasy when they get hot. He was the MVP of the Sun Bowl, 5 catches, 115 yards. He ended up numbers, like I said, 20 catches, 322 yards, 4 touchdowns, but 17 average. Again, for each pass. So that's kind of the critical thing. I thought Notre Dame stretch the field, get these guys, and when they get the chance, hopefully they can fill in, because last year the wide receivers I feel didn't do enough for Notre Dame. They need to complement it this year and come together as a group. And they have Jaden Thomas is also there. They have Jaden Greathouse is there. Mitch Evans. So I think the thing with Notre Dame is definitely pick them. They won't all look like that by mid-season if there's injuries, if there's things going on yet. But I'm excited just about the unit and about where they're headed. And you need a few of these guys to jump out and take on the next role.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Riley Leonard in that system. We saw what he did at Duke in that 2022 year, absolutely just printing fantasy points with the rushing totals. I like the situation in Notre Dame. Does the step up in competition for Chris Mitchell worry you at all? Just a little bit. We have seen it in the past where those wide receivers do take that step up and kind of struggle at that next level. Does that worry you at all for Chris Mitchell coming from FIU? And do you have a solidified wide receiver that you are attacking in every draft in this wide receiver room?
So he actually would be that receiver I would attack on Notre Dame. It's interesting. Jaden Thomas would be the guy that would almost looks crazy, like most NFL ready of a player that might not have the stats.
Yeah,
Jaden Thomas is a guy that can fight for the ball and tough and over the middle and contested stuff. But I think a guy like Chris Mitchell, they specifically got immediately in the portal to stretch that field and to run the boundaries and can go, because they're missing that a little bit element that I think, so the risk will be, can their offense come together and get that ball down the field? If it doesn't, Chris would struggle, but yet if they can get somebody like that the ball, I think that would be the number one guy. But the other guy that I mentioned, Faison, there's a lot of talk around there of how excited they are about him because of when they come on at the end of that year like that and win a bowl game, basically, or winning the bowl game for you. It's interesting. Not that it
sure it is. Yep, I like it. I like Notre Dame. And just like you have an affinity for one team, I have an affinity for one team. Not my favorite team. I do not have a favorite college football team, but that is the University of South Florida, a team that last year in yards per game was 13th across the whole college football landscape. When you look at what they do rushing the game, and that's where a lot of their fantasy points came about, especially from that QB position. 6th across NCAA in total rushes per game, 22nd in total rush yards per game as a unit, 189 rush yards per game. A lot of that propped up again by that QB, Byron Brown, 3,300 pass yards last year, 26 passing touchdowns. Didn't really solidify himself as that true QB1 until it was about week 10 into that playoff stretch. Week 10 against Memphis, 5 passing TDs, 377 pass yards. And then across the playoffs, he had 1,233 pass yards. He averaged 308 pass yards per game, 11 touchdowns through that time, passing touchdowns alone, not even rushing totals. So Byron Brown was winning you championships. Week 10, that last week of the regular season for college fantasy, heading into week 11, 12, and 13, the kid was just lightning in a bottle. And then you look at his rush totals, 1,000 rush yards, 6.1 yards per carry, 11 rush TDs. Through the fantasy playoffs, he averaged 1 rushing TD per game to add to those great, solid passing totals. The overall QB4 last year in total points and the overall QB5 in total points per game. We've seen it. I've seen it in every mock. I've seen it in every best ball draft I've been in this year. He is going in the first round of fantasy drafts. He was going 8th, 9th, 10th round last year. He has jumped up into that first round, fighting to be that possibly QB1 heading into this year. And then you look at the wide receiver. His wide receiver one returning Sean Atkins, 120 targets, 92 receptions, just over 1,000 receiving yards, 7 TDs. Isn't the most prolific passing offense, but if there's a wide receiver to own in this offense, it is Sean Atkins, a guy that spent a lot of his time in the slot, finished as the wide receiver 22, 16.4 fantasy points per game. The scheme for the Bulls was to get Watkins the ball in the middle of the field and let him do what he does best. Top 25 in yards after the catch across the whole NCAA. So currently, Sean Atkins is a mid to late round, second round pick that we've seen so far. So another solid fantasy producer coming out of South Florida. And then if you got a late round pick, you take a shot at Naquan Wright. Again, Byron Brown is the leading running back for South Florida. But if you got a late round best ball pick, maybe even Naquan Wright could be the guy for you. Just under 1,000 yards last year, 8 rushing TDs. So his value is attached to touchdowns. But if he does get that touchdown, like I said, perfect best ball running back. He averaged just 10.4 fantasy points per game last year. So the University of South Florida is a team that I'm always trying to get at least one piece from, preferably the top 2 guys, Byron Brown and Sean Atkins, Mike.
Yeah. I mean, Byron Brown, as you were talking there, I can remember last year, I think he was picked up on waivers in a couple of our leagues. When you even said drafted 9th or 10th round, I think he maybe wasn't drafted and picked up during.
If I was in the league, he was drafted.
Right 3 weeks in. We're like, what? Who is this guy? Yeah, and away he goes. But yeah, some of these smaller, maybe smaller schools or lesser known schools can have big producers that can help you win a championship for sure.
Yeah, and those are some of the schools you want to attack because maybe the competition isn't the greatest. And these guys, like a Byron Brown, is putting up over 3,000 pass yards, putting up over 25 passing touchdowns, able to rush for over 1,000 yards. That's where the value of a quarterback like that is going to sit. There's a ton of these guys in college football. It's just about where you're going to go and draft them. You're going to be drafting them late before they stand out, before they break out. And then once they break out, man, it's like, do you want to draft a quarterback that early in your drafts? I almost got him in that best ball 6 there. He went right before me. I was going to take him at the 12th spot if he was coming to me. So South Florida, Notre Dame, and Mike, hit us with their next program.
Look at that. The Ole Miss. I just drafted this quarterback, and you're not going to believe who I drafted him ahead in the number 8 draft. I sat there and thought, you know what? I'm going to draft Jackson Dart because I'm talking about him ahead of Shedeur Sanders. You'd think I'm crazy, but
nice.
So in that draft, I picked Gabriel in the first round, picked 1.12. So in the 4th round, I thought I'll grab another quarterback. They weren't going off the board, as we said, as early in some of these drafts.
Sure.
Not as it's running back heavy. But I thought I'll pick Jackson Dart since we're talking about him. Last year, like as I looked at his numbers, and when you're looking in on Fantrax, shout out there, when you're looking at who to pick and seeing points from the year earlier, 3,364 yards passing, 23 touchdowns, but he also rushed for 8 and rushed for 391 yards. And he has a 78.5 QBR rating, 65% completion rating or percentage. And he's with Lane Kiffin there, and in this offense, I'll talk about a few of those players. As you can see, I think the sky's the limit on what Jackson Dart can do, and because he has scramble ability as well. So he, maybe not Shedeur Sanders, as I was saying, scramble ability, but very good scramble ability.
Sure he does, yeah.
And looks, ready to play the part. Good leader too. So his leadership ability is showing through, and his grit. That's a little bit about Jackson. Trey Harris is a great receiver who's not on this little icon here, but Trey Harris, almost 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and again, my stat of the day, 18.2 average reception average. And Trey Harris is going fairly early in the first several rounds for obvious reasons. Great receiver. Someone in the portal, Antoine Juice Wells, who I find interesting. So looking back, last year he only played 2 games. He was hurt, but these are the type of players I like to target that in recent experience has helped me. If I win a league, this type of pick is the pick that can do it. And you have to make yourself do it. So that's one of my advice from people, like make yourself picks up, because if you don't go off the board, if you're just going to fall in line with every pick, it could work. But I mean, odds are not. I wouldn't know the percentage of what that would be, especially in college. But last year, injured, only played 2 games. But in 2021, how many yards do you think he had, Chris? In 2021. So 2 years ago at South Carolina.
Ooh, I'm going to go on a limb here because I think you're setting me up. I think this is a trap. I'm not going to go low. I'm going to go 1,100 yards.
Yeah, 1,250 yards.
So close.
Receiving 83 catches. How many touchdowns did he get that year for South Carolina? 15. 15. So then, in 2022, it went down a bit, but he had 928 yards, 6 TDs, 68 catches. So he had those 2 good years. So it's not great that last year, injuries happen. But you want to take advantage of that. The longer careers in college, I find now, as I was thinking about this, you know what? That's when you got to jump in and do this, especially in best ball. It's worth a risk where your risk quotient is where you want to pick. I'm not saying pick it too early, but we'll see. He's probably in around 8, 9, or 10, around 8, 9, or 10 with the amount of receivers. You could pick him. And last player I want to talk about here is one of my favorite players. I watched this bowl game and I was like, I couldn't even believe it. And I missed him in this draft. I think this guy's going to be a stud and be a great NFL tight end, Caden Priesthorn. I couldn't believe it down the side. They just kept throwing and kept feeding him, and 2 touchdowns in the bowl game. And he So his stats were, pretty good. 2022, 600 yards though in 2022, and 7 TDs last year, 4 TDs, 450 yards about. But it's interesting. Like I know a theme you like near the end of the year. It doesn't mean everything. It's not the be all end all in those bowl games or the couple games before, but that's kind of like their playoff, right? Treat those last couple games in the bowl game like a mini 3-game playoff. And if that's when they're step up, those are the type of guys for next year, that momentum that you might want to gamble on more than a few of the others. So I really like him as a well, he's not a dark horse tight end. He's rated in the top 10 for the upcoming season. Yeah. But that's what I'd say about Ole Miss, but we'll see where they end up. Good record last year.
Yep. And they did lose Quinshon Judkins, a big piece to that offense, moving over to OSU, a team that you're going to jump into in just a little bit here, Mike. What do they do at running back? Who is the running back? If there is a running back to own, they did have the transfer in from LSU with Logan Diggs. They got Pedrick Riscano there. We know that coaching staff can produce healthy stud running backs, but who's the guy to own? Where are we putting our chips on in this running back room? Because you're going to want a piece of whoever it is that's going to be touting the ball for Ole Miss, right?
Right. And so that is a question mark. That's a tough one to answer. I know Logan Diggs he was a former Notre Dame running back as well and ran tough there when Kelly was there. He liked Diggs a lot. He had a timeshare the first year he was in Notre Dame. And then he kind of timeshare. They followed each other there, kind of timeshare there with Davis Price, this and that. I don't think Diggs can definitely carry the ball more than what he's been allowed to, and he's a tough runner. And will he come out of there? Because I heard his injury, he should be fine to go for the beginning of the year and everything like that, and spring after spring workouts and stuff. So we'll see. I'm not sure right or wrong on this, Chris, whether Bentley's there still or not. Ulysses Bentley.
I think so. I have to double check on that. But it is a situation where I'm going to be paying attention to the next transfer window to see if they do go out and grab someone to put into that backfield.
I think
someone was to enter that.
Great
that has
point.
It's a good quality name. A situation I'm going to want to attack. We got Hollywood in the chat. What's up, Hollywood? Thanks for tuning in. Jorge Edwards here has a really good question. Are cheat code QBs more prevalent in college fantasy football? Cheat code QBs, if you don't know, are QBs that are more inclined to run the ball. And how early should they be drafted? I'm going to go out here and say yes. Cheat code QBs are more prevalent in college football, mainly because of the schemes that you see in the college games, all the option plays and the draws. It's just built for the rushing quarterback. And you see at the end of the season, a lot of the rushing quarterbacks are at the top of the quarterback finishes when it's all said and done. Caden Salter, Byron Brown, those are just the two up the top of my head. We've seen some late. Jaden Daniels had a great, I think he finished as the QB. He did finish as the QB1 last year. And he's just a guy that absolutely uses his legs. And with how short the college football season is, fantasy in general, it's only 13 weeks long, 10 weeks for the regular season in most setups. You're going to want the QBs that give you an edge, and it's those rushing QBs that give you that ultimate edge. And we've seen it last year. Diego Pavia was a guy that helped me get into a position to win a league when it came down to him from New Mexico State. Now he's with, do you know? Vanderbilt. Now he's with Vanderbilt. Yeah. Diego Pavia. But so
listening to you there.
Bentley is back. We do got someone in the chat that said Bentley is back. Yeah. D-Sup. Thank you, D-Sup. Bentley. D-Sup seen some things with his avatar. Ulysses. You know, that's the avatar that's seen some things. But D-Sup says Bentley is back, and we appreciate you.
So follow up with you there. One thing with college we've noticed is as you're speaking, streaks of those running backs can be critical in the middle of the, like, even if you pick someone and they're hot for those few weeks to push you into the playoffs. I think you did that in one league due to it compacted to being shorter. It can be much more valuable. to answer Jorge's question there. Absolutely.
And it was all Russian QBs that got me there. Whether it was Garrett Green, Nicholas Fateo from Middle Tennessee.
Jalen Milroe for me. Jalen Milroe was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was always those Russian QBs that were able to put me, because you need a passing QB to be a Dylan Gabriel, to throw over 3,500 yards and 35 passing TDs, to be prevalent week in and week out. So yeah, give me the Russian QB in college football. And really, you could draft them anywhere if you want an elite one like Byron Brown or Caden Salter. You're obviously going to have to reach up in your drafts if it's a 2 QB draft. But if you want to wait, you can grab nice, solid QBs later in your draft. So we've covered Notre Dame. We've covered Mississippi. We've covered the University of South Florida. And now we are moving to Boise State, a team that has a new quarterback under center. My call for a starter when the season starts, Malachi Nelson, transfer in from USC. He was a freshman last year. And the belief is he came into Boise State to have that opportunity to be that right away starter for them in that program, on that team. He had coming in, he was recruited, had offers from some of the biggest schools, but decided Boise State was the place for him to transfer to out of USC, who's most likely running with Miller Moss. He's ending up in Boise. They do got Cam Camper, who did transfer in. They have Prince Strawn, a player that I am going to be investing in quite a bit. I believe he ended up as the leading wide receiver for Boise State behind Eric McAllister, who did transfer out. McAllister, 878 yards, vacating 90 targets. Strawn last year ran 187 routes, 48 targets, 43 receptions. Did have the same amount of TDs as McAllister, but that room has been stripped barren. Billy Bones is gone. Stephon Cobbs is gone. George Holani's gone. I mean, it's Eric McAllister. It was Ashton Jeanty, and then it was Prince Strawn. Sorry, I was wrong on the Prince Strawn numbers. Prince Strawn, 23 targets, 12 receptions, 274 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jeanty's numbers, the players I'm talking about next, receiving totals, 48 targets, 43 receptions, 569 yards, 5 touchdowns. So in reality, Ashton Jeanty, the running back one for this team, was also the wide receiver too. Ashton Jeanty, in every draft I've been in so far this year, whether it's best ball, mock, he has been going as the solidified RB1. 101 RB1. The guy, he finished as the RB2 just behind Ollie Gordon last year because of what Ollie Gordon was able to do in that championship game. But Ashton Jeanty, if you pick Ollie Gordon, if you pick Ashton Jeanty, one or the other, we're not going to be mad here on One Foot Down. But Ashton Jeanty is a guy, if you have a top 3 pick, you're most likely not getting him at 3. You got to pick him at 1 or 2. And you're going to look back and you're going to be happy. He's a plug-and-play running back. He's a plug-and-play wide receiver. George Holani's gone, so you don't got to worry about him taking any snaps. Taylor Green's gone as well. He had 78 attempts. He took some of the carries away from Jeanty last year as well. With Nelson coming in, I don't see him rushing as much as Taylor Green. I believe he's going to try to rely on a little bit more of his arm. And that is the Boise State Broncos, a team that Malachi Nelson, I've seen him go across the board in multiple rounds, 2nd round, 3rd round. In one draft, he went in the 10th round. So you're going to be able to find this guy in multiple spots in your leagues. Right now, there's no solidified ADP. So wherever you feel comfortable taking a player like Malachi Nelson, just go draft him. Because right now, like we're talking about, it is early to be doing this kind of draft. So if you got a vibe and you want to take Malachi Nelson in the 5th, if he's there, I think I took him in the 6th round of that best ball 6 draft there that we're in, Mike. And he was my QB3. I have Haynes King, Shadur Sanders, and then Malachi Nelson's my QB3. So a player that's going to be put in a position to produce because of the opportunity he has on Boise State. Malachi Nelson is a quarterback that I'm going to invest in. Ashton Janty is a running back that if I have a top 3 pick, I'm going to invest in. And then for the wide receiver room, it's Cam Camper, it's Prince Strawn, and I'm going to put my chips here on Prince Strawn over Cam Camper in that wide receiver room. So Boise State is a team that you're going to want to attack. You don't have to attack it early. You can probably get Prince Strawn, Cam Camper late. You can get Malachi Nelson in the mid rounds, but you're not going to touch Ashton Janty if you don't have a top 3 pick. So don't even think about Janty if you're not in that spot in your draft. So Mike, I mean, you've been talking some pretty stout programs. You talk some pretty storied programs. So why not finish it with one more trip around the block?
One more trip around the block is the Ohio State Buckeyes. To close off on Boise, with Ashton Janty, Ollie Gordon, and Hampton are so, like, I'm kind of surprised he's staying as the consensus, I would say, there. But you can't go wrong with any of them. I mean, Hampton, that home run ability. Gordon and Hampton and
any three of them, exactly.
Yeah,
we've seen Ollie Gordon just put out massive numbers,
gone for 60, just like that, gone. Same with Hampton, and they have people leaving too. But yeah, that's exciting. I'm probably not going to get a share. I never get to pick first, so it's
because the algorithm knows you're too good, Mike.
It's ridiculous. So back to Ohio State. Sorry to get distracted there, but the Buckeyes.
Excuse me, sir. Your Canadian is showing.
Will Howard coming in and transferring from Kansas State. So he's going to come in, and they think he'll start for Ohio State. He passed for 2,643 yards last year and 24 touchdowns. He has rushing ability as well. 81 rushes, 351 yards, 9 touchdowns, and a big fella, 6'5", 240. That fits nicely, I think, with Ohio State and the conference and everything like that. When I thought about that, I'm like, man, I think that fits. I mean, McCord, who had left, it wasn't poor for them. So Will has some shoes to fill. I mean, I think Kyle has room to grow, McCord. We'll see how Will does. And to lead into, we all know big news was Trevon Henderson not declaring for the draft and coming back. So in the offseason, it was interesting. We were texting back and forth, Chris, during some of the, I can't remember, NFL playoffs in the window there at the end of the year, between season and the bowl games. And then Judkins, one of the first texts you sent was he was one of the first to declare where he wanted to go in the portal. I'm like, what? So it is interesting dynamic. Quinshon's numbers are incredible as I was looking those up. 2022, 1,567 yards, 1,158 yards the next year, 2023, 15 TDs, 2 more receiving TDs, and with Henderson. So it could go one of two ways. It could be like, dog eat dog there, man. It could be awesome. It just depends, like how prolific that offense can be. They're in a conference typically with some tougher defenses, but I've also seen them put up, for those in college, say you're 6 or 7 of the weaker teams, you're not playing Michigan every week, or they really got to put up those numbers in those weeks that they're playing some of the lesser teams on the schedule. So that'll be interesting to say as I was picking this, who to pick right now. They're going around 6, 7, and 8, and they're not going as high as some of the running backs we've discussed, because I think guys are a little afraid of the by committee.
Sure.
So if we move through there,
warranted.
And it's warranted, because you don't know. But one of the things, as I thought of last year, then get both. Like, there's guys now drafting, if you're going to get a backfield and the college rosters are deeper and your best ball is a deeper lineup, find a way to sneak in both in case, and you could come up golden in case of injury, in case of one's hot or in and out, you got that guy filling in that short season, stud back. At receiver, we have Carnell Tate. I think you're high on him, Chris. He's supposed to take over the role. Not that he's going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., but they think he'll run the route tree similar to what Harrison ran and play, for the most part, that receiving position with Emeka Egbuka, coming back and playing his role. He had 515 yards, 4 touchdowns last year, so he has room to grow too. So it'll be interesting how they divide that up. But Tate has almost a 15-yard average as well receiving, and Egbuka 12.6 last year. But I think he can improve on that. Then another young receiver, Innis. So it'll be interesting with the new quarterback, but the stability of the running backs, which I think and out of the backfield and being that blanket for Howard coming in early, will be critical to settle in and then see what the receivers do. And lastly, they got a tight end. I really like tight end Cade Stover that was there. Had him on a few of my teams. He was money down the stretch. He got hot through last year, but G. Scott Jr. is no slouch in his own right. So I think he is kind of a little bit of a sleeper. He had 10 receptions only and a touchdown, like playing backup role, but big dude and quick. And if he comes in, opportunity knocks. So I think Ohio State's a team, obviously, you want to invest in. And like I said, the only question mark is sometimes in the conferences. Think about defense a little bit, but I don't go too crazy with it, because I've also seen some games where I've seen Ohio State, Michigan be 38-35, 41-38. Like, scores are up there. For the most part, once they meet up and get going, hard to predict.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I get what Ohio State is. I get they're the storied school. They've produced all these great fantasy producers in college football and in the NFL. My only worry is if Will Howard is the starter, how much does that hurt guys like Quinshon Judkins, who already has Travion Henderson attached to him, right? Well, Howard's he's gonna run the ball. He's gonna take away some of those totes. He's gonna take away some of those carries from Quinshon Judkins. And not only that, he's got to worry about Travion Henderson there as well. So what does that do to the value of those running backs? And then you want to flip it over to the wide receivers. Look, Will Howard is no CJ Stroud. He's not going to come out, throw 4,000 yards and nearly 50 touchdowns. It's just not what he does as a quarterback. So what does that do to the wide receivers at that point? You got Cardinal Tate, Emeka Egbuka, Brandon Innis. You got Jeremiah Smith coming in, the freshman wide receiver. We talk about it year in and year out, how loaded this wide receiver room is. So, Mike, if you had to pick one wide receiver to lay your hat on as the top college fantasy football asset in this wide receiver room, knowing that it's Will Howard, because personally, for me, for fantasy purposes, it might not be more beneficial for the quarterback if I'm drafting Will Howard and I want that rushing upside. But for my skill players, for my positional players, like my wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs, I might want Devin Brown starting for the quarterback. So I don't know what your take is on that, but who's the wide receiver that you're putting your stamp on as the wide receiver one in this room? Is it Egbuka, Tate? Is it a dark horse?
No, it'll be Emeka for sure. They like to fall in line in college, typically, unless somebody falls really bad,
especially at Ohio State
and in a lot of places. So it's his room to carry. Yet it'll depend, I think, how much they open up the offense. I have a feeling, reading that last year, watching Ohio State, look like they can play any type of game. Why they're so valued in college football, they can play any type of game that's put in front of them from their opponent. If they want to muck it up and play defensive game and win, that is part of the thing. That can be low. If they want to have a shootout and go forward and change the lot, they can do that too. So they're pretty flexible that way. But I think with the makeup of their team now and bringing in these players, a little bit of what I think will happen is I think they want to push that by. We'll want to push the offense differently. Maybe they'll even put Henderson and Judkins out at the same time. Maybe they'll flank Henderson out. Who knows? Like, he's one of the best pass catchers in the nation. When you give him the opportunity, you could feed him. Will they use both subset? Will they do the wishbone and do Judkins behind him? Big, all sorts of stuff. So it'll be interesting because it's a typical offense that Ohio State runs in the past. They do like to, like I said, the frustrating thing being watching them play at times can be if they slow it down for a quarter and get slow it and then start up for a quarter. They seem to be a team. They just got to learn to go and stick to one philosophy, I think, on that side of the ball. But it'd be Mika Ibuka's room, and I think the MVP could be co-MVPs, the running backs, how they're used. Maybe don't shy away from using. Maybe there will be value there for both. I mean,
Yep.
Right.
And at least I agree with that.
At least you know what you're getting. So they each get 900 yards. I mean, here we are. Obviously, each get 900.
And but then does that not solidify them being picked in that 6th round as maybe that RB 15, right? So we're kind of not hitting the mark based on where we're drafting them, right?
Right.
900 yards, 8 TDs for both.
I mean,
maybe 1,000 all-purpose yards. Just over maybe 1,200 all-purpose yards with the receiving profile that these guys have as well. But so your pick's Emeka Egbuka. Look up for Jorge Edwards' profile on Emeka Egbuka. Hope to do it and him justice. Jorge, we are not worried about you doing justice for him. I've seen your work. It speaks for itself. All right, our last team on the block, Liberty University. And when you look at what they did last year as an offense, number 6 in points per game, team 4 in yards per game, number 8 in points per play, number 3 in yards per play, number 5 in third down conversion. And then you look at the rushing statistics. Rush play percentage, 68.23%. That's good for 4th across all college football. Yards per rush, 6.1, 2nd across all college football. Rushes per game, 47.9 rushes per game. That's good for 4th. And rush yards per game. Mike, if you had to take a shot in the dark and guess the number of rush yards per game for the Liberty Flames, what would be your number?
320 yards.
Oh, it's high, but it's close. 293 rushing yards.
There were a few games last year why I was thinking I should have went 300 right on the mark, but both of them put those numbers out there. Salter and Cooley at 150 each.
Just studs.
So it's
studs
like it's a totally different, totally different makeup.
And Salter finished as the overall QB2, just behind Jaden Daniels last season. He didn't have the high output of passing yards total, but he did have more passing TDs than Byron Brown, 32 passing TDs. He did lose his number 1 wide receiver in CJ Daniels to LSU. A story just came out from Liberty. I believe it was the head coach that said LSU paid $300,000 allegedly to get CJ Daniels to transfer over to LSU. So he did lose his number 1 wide receiver, but the kid can absolutely ball. QB1 in average depth of target combined, like we talk about, with that elite rushing profile, 77.2 rushing yards per game. He put up just over 1,000 rush yards on the year. And then if you look at those 32 passing TDs, he tied that to 12 rushing TDs, and he was just a big play ability machine. 20 TDs, 20 passing TDs, and over 1,200 passing yards coming over the 20-yard mark. So if you look at his rushing profile base as well as what he can do with stretching the field, Caden Salter was just giving you fantasy points every week. Right now, he is the QB1, being drafted as the QB1, even though he lost his wide receiver 1. He did attempt to transfer out of Liberty, but he did renege on that coming back. 30.28 fantasy points per game last season. The kid, again, just an absolute stud for Liberty. They did go undefeated as well. Don't forget to mention that they did go undefeated and get snubbed. Hollywood, Salter made a wise decision to stay at Liberty. He did make a wise decision to stay at Liberty. And then you look at all his rushing totals and what Salter was able to do rushing the ball. And then you look at the backfield of the running back and you think maybe they got an elite rushing quarterback there. Maybe the running back isn't that great. And then you look at what Quentin Cooley did coming out of that backfield, Mike, and we just touched on it briefly there and how good they were. 16 rushing touchdown, 1,400 yards. Quentin Cooley was most likely the waiver claim of the year last year. He averaged just over 100 yards and 1 touchdown per game. 41 carries of over 10 yards. That put him at the RB5 spot. The RB21 in total fantasy points, averaging 17.39 fantasy points per game. Capped off the championship weekend where he went off for 3 rushing TDs. And ball security wasn't a problem either for Cooley. Only 2 fumbles on the season. He didn't get used in the passing game as much as we'd like. If that improves,
golden.
we cool him, baby, because Quentin Cooley is just going to be that running back one that we all want, that you can draft it again in the mid rounds of your college fantasy drafts. And then when you're looking at the wide receiver room, it's barren there for Liberty. You're going to have to pay attention to the spring games and spring practices and everything else. Hopefully they bring a guy in from the transfer portal. They did bring in Tyson Mobley to take over maybe that outside wide receiver role for CJ Daniels. But I don't know if you're going to touch him there. They got Sibley as well, who is returning for Liberty. But as of right now, the only 2 guys that I'm attacking on this team are Caden Salter and Quentin Cooley. 2 guys that just print fantasy points. And I know I say that a lot. It's one of my favorite terms, but that's what these guys do, man. It's week in, week out.
Chris, the games are played on the field.
Week in and week out, these guys, they just do it. And you don't got to worry about them in your lineup, man. They're no sweat bets. And I love them. So we've covered 6 of our favorite teams. Notre Dame, we've covered Ole Miss, Boise State, University of South Florida, Ohio State University, and Liberty University. Mike, any honorable mentions?
Honorable mentions. I knew you'd pose the question, honorable mention for a player or a team?
Player, team, anything you want to throw out there, big guy. I know we're both heavily invested in Texas. We know Texas is going to have a decent team.
One team, well, it's a no-brainer. I can't even say their team, but Arizona's a team to heavy on Arizona. Fafita, if I say his name right.
Fafita, Noah Fafita.
Yeah, with Tet McMillan.
Yep.
2 running back, but see, there's a 2 running back combo again, so I got myself in a little trouble with a combo there again, but their philosophy in pushing the ball and in that conference and good weather typically and all of that. So if you want to jump into some of the conferences that typically are playing in Sun Belt and Pac-10 or whatever, Pac-12, pick some of those teams that will be playing usually in better weather and on fast tracks and in offenses that push the ball down the field. But it's interesting as you go east, there's a lot of teams that was coming to my mind as you were talking, like what's going to happen at Florida State that lost? Guys, I'm sitting here thinking, I know Ugliala, however you pronounce his name going in there, DJ, which is good, right? But there's different teams that have holes. So it'll be interesting the next portal to see who kind of how it plays, because some of the typical powerhouses are short. Michigan's another one. They're short. They have good talent that go to the NFL, but who's coming in? They're not going to let it sit. They'll see in spring, and they'll do something to bring in what they can, to make up the difference a little bit. But
yep, and the Colorado State and Colorado State
both
sneaky. Fowler, Nicolosi. I just drafted Justin Simmons. I think I got him at a good value there. Torrey Horton came back. They did lose the great tight end Dallin Holker, who went up to the NFL draft, and then Colorado, Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Edwards, the running back there. Yeah, LeJohntay Wester, Cordell Russell moving over there.
Horn is there.
Jimmy Horn there. The Colorado, Coach Prime is going to put, if it's his son's draft year, he's going to want to make sure he's got the weapons around his son to make his son look as best as possible. And I don't blame him for that. I love him for that, because that's going to equal opportunity for us college fantasy football players. These are the programs you're going to want to attack. Colorado State, the 6 ones we just mentioned here. And
one thing interesting there with Shedeur is his nil number. Nil number that it'll be very interesting. News in college was Nick Saban coming out and trying to put his opinion, on what are we doing to college football, is taking the same philosophies of contracts. Nil is like a contract, like an NFL contract, but how will they live up to them? As you were saying that, like, he's going to use him. If you're making $1 million, $1.5 million, $1.6 million, and you're on a scale of nil contracts, you're going to use them and give them a little more of a leash. So when you're picking some of these guys, whereas in the past, and watching college from years in the past, the leash was the other way. It was a short leash. If they're struggling, they're changing them quick. QBs would change a lot. Now with some of these top, as you're drafting in fantasy, you should feel a little more security to go, okay, they've brought in this guy, they're paying him that deal, and they're going to give him that extra leash instead of a short leash. That's the one thing I would say with this. Is I've been listening to some opinions in the college site, so
I like it.
There's my little strategy for the night.
Yeah, Mike's minute. I like it. Mike's minute.
Mike's minute rant.
Mike's minute.
Mike's rant. End of the night rant on nil money.
Any last words before we get out of here, Mike?
I'm all good. I'm getting old, Chris? Getting old. It'll be my bedtime soon.
Oh, geez. That's it for us. We appreciate each and every one of you that is either listening to this show right now, joined in on the live stream, drop the comment, drop the question, subscribe to the Fantasy in Frames channel, which I hope you do. And while you're at it, ring that notification bell to get notified whenever the Fantasy in Frames team drops new content. What should we do on the regular? For Mike Haase at FF Mike H, I'm Chris Battistel, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
Adios, amigos. Peace.